Hey everyone, Zach here. I do texture tutorials and this is part 3 of texturing this bike. In part 1, we went through how to use Mari's material system. If you're not organised, your node graph can get really messy and end up looking like a plate of spaghetti. So I shared a free template that's going to speed up your workflow and help keep your node graph neat and organised. In part 2, we added realistic breakup to materials. We didn't use any artificially procedurally generated textures. You can grab this on my Gumroad, and worth noting, these are literally just black and white maps, so they'll work in any program you're using. We use scans of actual surface imperfections to break up the surfaces. Part 3, which is today, we're going to paint rust, dust, dirt and oil masks. My surface imperfections pack comes with a ton of grunge masks. I'm going to show you a load of gizmos that are going to drastically speed up how you paint your masks in Mari. They're templates that are essentially just drag and drop. They're non-destructive and they're designed with a production environment in mind. But most importantly, they're art directable. This is why I use them over any smart mask out there. They're included within my Surface Imperfections texture pack, and as I continue to build my Mari gizmo library using these textures, I'll be updating the pack on Gumroad. So please subscribe so you can see when I release the final part of this series, where we'll take all of the maps we've painted into LookDev. And if you like what I'm doing here, please consider liking the video. It really helps, and once we hit 1,000 subscribers, I plan on starting to stream so we can have a little bit more interaction. Worth noting, these are just my techniques. These certainly aren't the only or best way to texture, so if you use other methods, let us know in the comments. I always find it interesting to see how other artists approach these things. To bring in our template, let's right click on the node graph and select our template. It might look a little bit complicated, but it's laid out in an orderly fashion once we go through it. First thing we need to do to make sure all of the gizmos work is we need to import our curvature and ambient occlusion masks into Mari. We'll import them as a geo channel, and essentially a geo channel is where we can import our utility masks into Mari. We can then name them, and then we can use that geo channel node and copy those utility masks in at any point of our node graph. It speeds things up a ton and keeps your node graph really light. You'll notice it's created all of our channels for us. These will come in with the template, so no need to make them from scratch. This is the dirt mask. I tried to keep the controls to a minimum, where for the most part it's just the midpoint that you need to adjust. Next is the dirt mask. It's much softer and much more high frequency dust, and it also uses an axis mask built into Mari to layer settled dust onto the top faces of the model. Next is the rust mask. Just need to make sure your AO is inverted. The rust mask uses the curvature and ambient occlusion to put rust on top of the model. And the final one is the oil mask. As standard, it will just come black, so we need to paint where we want it to go. Again, it's using a grunge texture from my texture pack, so we'll get natural, random oil splatters exactly where we paint them. So just going to make sure that I'm viewing through the channel so we can see where we're painting. We'll go back up to the dirt mask. With all of these gizmos, the texture maps are exposed, so you can change the scale as you require, or if you don't have very good UV, you can create a triplanar node instead of a 2D tileable. The dirt gizmo has two layers, ambient occlusion based dirt and generic dirt laid on top. Understand, you'll never get a preset that's going to work 100% on every model. We're going to need to hero paint areas where we don't want dirt, otherwise it's just going to look like we've used ambient occlusion to drive our dirt, and it will always look CG. So let's hero paint. We can create a paint node with a 0 alpha, and then we can paint away. The longer you spend on this, the better it's going to look. And in a lot of cases, less is more, so really take your time. Now the dust, same drill, adjust your ambient occlusion to drive the dirt and the final contrast. We're always going to get areas where we need to paint it out. You'll see this column on the right that's multicolored. This is the dirt, dust and rust masks packed into one RGB channel. This essentially means you only need to export one channel, and you can load this into the renderer and shuffle out whatever channel you need. So you don't need to use this, it's just for convenience if you wanted to. You can export separate maps if you want, so you can delete this if you don't want it. This is the rust. I want it to be pretty soft duck size, so not super crunchy. And with all of these masks I time-lapse just to keep the video short, but I probably spent about 20 minutes hand painting these masks just as a first pass. So these would help save time in a production environment. If your UVs change, it's really easy to repaint these new areas. Once you're happy, I definitely go in and project dirt masks on top of this. Without these story points, your asset will feel generic, but using a template like this will give you full coverage generic dirt very quickly, and it will allow you to spend more time hand painting and telling a story with your asset. And finally, exporting the textures with the material system. All we need to do is expand the last material merge, create a channel node, and we can connect that up to the diff color. And then we can do the same for the rest of the channels. To export all of these channels, just right click on the export manager, add our outputs, select our path, and then we can export. That's it for textures on this bike. I really enjoyed this one, and in the final part we'll take it into Look Dev and really bring it to life. So be sure to subscribe so you see when I drop the next video, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.